Jerusalem, July 15, 1099. The sun rises over walls that have stood for 3,000 years. Inside, the city wakes to prayer. Muslim families prepare for morning devotions. The call echoes from minarets. Children play in narrow streets. Merchants arrange their wares. Life continues as it has for generations, unaware that today, everything ends. Outside the walls, an army waits. Not just soldiers, pilgrims, knights, men who have walked 1,000 miles through desert and disease to reach this place. They wear crosses stitched to their chests. They believe God has promised them this city. They believe their sins will be forgiven if they take it. They have been laying siege for 5 weeks. Today, the walls fall. The breach comes at dawn. Wood towers roll forward. Ladders slam against stone. And through the gaps they pour. Not like soldiers taking a city, like floodwater bursting through a dam. Unstoppable, merciless, divine in their certainty. What happens next is recorded by chroniclers on both sides. By Muslim historians who survived by fleeing. By Christian monks who arrived afterward and tried to make sense of the carnage. By the Crusaders themselves who wrote letters home describing what they did as holy work. The accounts differ in details but agree on the shape of the horror. On what happened to the women. On what happened to those who surrendered, who begged for mercy, who believed that even in war there are rules. There are no rules. Not today. Not in Jerusalem. Not when men believe they are doing God's will. The Knights Templar do not yet exist as an order. That will come later, in 1119, when 9 knights take vows to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. But the men who will found the Templars are here, fighting in this First Crusade, learning lessons they will carry forward, learning that conquest requires more than victory on the battlefield. It requires breaking the spirit of the conquered. It requires making resistance unthinkable. It requires demonstrating that nothing is sacred when the cross meets the crescent. The killing begins in the streets. Men are cut down, not in battle, in flight. Old men, young boys, anyone who cannot fight is killed where they stand. The Crusaders move through the city systematically, house by house, family by family. They are efficient. They have done this before in smaller cities along the march to Jerusalem. They know what they are looking for. They are looking for wealth, for gold and silver and anything portable. They are looking for captives, for people who can be sold or ransomed. And they are looking for women, because in the mathematics of conquest, women are both spoils and weapons, tools for humiliation, for demonstrating dominance, for ensuring that even those who survive will be broken. If you are drawn to histories that force us to confront what humans do when faith becomes permission, then stay with us. This is not a story about heroes. This is a story about what happens when righteousness becomes license for cruelty. When the sacred is used to justify the profane. The women of Jerusalem know what is coming. They have heard the stories from other cities, from Antioch, from Mara, from the smaller towns that fell before Jerusalem. They know that surrender does not mean safety. They know that crying mercy does not stop what comes next. They barricade themselves in houses, in mosques, in any place that might offer shelter. But there is no shelter, not from an army that believes it is doing holy work. The Crusader chronicles are careful in their language. They say women were taken. They say women were distributed among the soldiers. They use the passive voice that hides who is doing what to whom. But the Muslim sources are clearer. Ibn al-Athir, writing decades later from accounts of survivors, describes systematic rape, mass rape as policy, not the chaos of battle but the deliberate strategy of conquest. The Templars, when they form as an order, will pride themselves on their discipline, on their rules, on their vows of poverty and chastity. They will become warrior monks, men who fight for God while denying themselves earthly pleasures. But here, in the First Crusade, before the order exists, the future Templars participate in what every crusader participates in: the taking of women as rewards, the public violation of prisoners, the demonstration that conquest means not just taking land but taking bodies, taking dignity, taking future. Some women are kept, made concubines, forced into households where they will bear children who will grow up Christian, grow up crusader, grow up not knowing their mother's language or faith. This is not just violence. This is demographic warfare. This is the erasure of a people through the bodies of their women. Others are sold. There are markets, slave markets that spring up in the conquered cities, where women and children are displayed and auctioned to the highest bidder. Some are bought by local Christians, some by merchants from Italy who will ship them west, some by other crusaders who want servants or concubines or simply property. The prices vary by age and appearance. Young and beautiful command higher prices. The old and plain are sometimes killed because they are not worth the cost of feeding. And some women take their own lives. This is in the sources too. Women who jump from walls rather than be captured, who cut their own throats with whatever blade they can find, who choose death because they understand that what waits for them is worse, that survival under these conditions is not survival but prolonged torture, that sometimes the only power left is the power to end it. The fall of Jerusalem becomes the template. When the Templars form and begin their work of protecting pilgrims and fighting Muslims, they carry forward the lessons of 1099. That terror is a weapon. That humiliation breaks resistance more effectively than military defeat. That what you do to women sends a message to men. That conquest is not just about taking territory, but about demonstrating that nothing the enemy holds sacred will be respected. In 1187, when Saladin retakes Jerusalem, he does not massacre the inhabitants. He demands ransom. Those who cannot pay become slaves, which is brutal, but it is not slaughter. He specifically protects women from rape. Muslim law forbids it. And Saladin, for all his pragmatism, is bound by his faith in ways the Crusaders are not. The contrast is deliberate. Saladin is making a point that Muslims are civilized, that Christians, for all their talk of righteousness, are barbarians. But this does not stop the Templars. They continue their work for 2 more centuries, fighting, conquering, building castles across the Holy Land. And in those castles, in those fortresses that dot the landscape like stone crosses, there are dungeons, there are prisoners, there are women who were taken during raids on Muslim villages. Women who are kept for the pleasure of knights who have supposedly taken vows of chastity. Women who bear children who are raised Christian or killed if they are too obviously the product of rape. The Templar Rule, written by Bernard of Clairvaux, explicitly forbids contact with women. Templars are not to kiss even their mothers or sisters. They are to avoid the company of women entirely. This is to keep them pure, to keep them focused on their holy mission. But the rule also contains exceptions. Captured women, women taken in war. These are not women in the sense that counts. These are spoils, property, bodies that exist to serve the needs of the order. There are trials later, after the Templars are suppressed in 1307, after Philip IV of France arrests them and extracts confessions through torture. The confessions include accusations of heresy, of idolatry, of secret rituals. But there are also accusations about women, about what happened in the castles, about the children born there, about the servants who were not servants but prisoners, about the things that were done in the name of maintaining an order of warrior monks who were supposed to be above earthly desires. Some historians dismiss these confessions as products of torture, as inventions designed to justify the suppression of a powerful order. And certainly, torture produces false confessions. But the pattern is consistent with what we know from other sources, from Muslim accounts, from the records of other crusader orders, from the basic reality that when you give men absolute power over captives, when you tell them their cause is righteous, When you create a culture where the enemy is not fully human, atrocities follow. The Templars are not unique. The other military orders do the same. The Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights. Every Crusader force that enters Muslim lands participates in this pattern of taking women as spoils, of rape as policy, of slavery and forced conversion, and the systematic destruction not just of bodies but of identities. The Templars are simply the most famous, the most romanticized, the ones we remember as noble knights in white mantles with red crosses, the ones we have turned into legends. But the women remember differently. The women who survived, the women who were taken, the women who bore children of rape and raised them in captivity, the women who died of disease or abuse or despair in Crusader castles. They remember the Templars not as holy warriors, but as men who did unholy things while claiming divine sanction, as men who wore crosses but acted like demons. The sources are fragmentary. Muslim chroniclers focus on the larger picture, on the political and military history. They mention the fate of women in passing, in phrases that are meant to convey horror without dwelling on details. This is partly modesty, partly the trauma of trying to record the unrecordable. How do you write about the systematic rape of your people? How do you preserve the dignity of the victims while acknowledging what happened? Christian sources are even more silent. They do not want to record this. They do not want to acknowledge that the heroes of Christendom committed atrocities. So they use euphemisms. They say women were taken captive. They say the city was sacked. They let readers imagine whatever they want to imagine, knowing that most will imagine something less brutal than reality. But occasionally the truth breaks through. A letter from a crusader to his family, describing the spoils. A chronicle that mentions how women were divided among the troops. A legal dispute over ownership of a slave. A baptismal record for a child born to an unnamed mother in a Crusader fortress. The fragments tell a story that the official histories try to hide. This is worse than death because death is an ending. What happened to these women was an endless death, a living death, a death of identity and hope and future. They were kept alive to serve, to bear children, to be constant reminders to their communities that resistance was futile, that the Crusaders could take anything, do anything, and call it holy. And when they finally died, these women, they left almost no trace. No graves with names, no memorials, no acknowledgement that they existed or suffered or mattered. They were simply absorbed into the machinery of conquest. Their bodies used, their lives extinguished, their memories erased by the same forces that destroyed them in life. The Templar Order is dissolved in 1312. The knights are arrested, tried, and in many cases executed. Their wealth is seized. Their castles are given to other orders or fall into ruin. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, is burned at the stake in Paris. He proclaims his innocence to the end. He curses the Pope and the king who condemned him. But he does not speak about the women. No one asks about the women. They are not part of the official charges. They are not part of the story that history wants to tell. Today, if you visit the Holy Land, you can still see Templar castles. Acre, Athlet, Tortosa, massive stone fortresses that commanded the landscape, that controlled trade routes and pilgrimage paths, that served as bases for raids into Muslim territory. Tourists visit them. They take photographs. They marvel at the architecture. They imagine noble knights defending Christianity. They do not imagine the dungeons, the cells where women were kept, the screams that echoed in those stone halls. The romanticization of the Templars is complete. Books, movies, video games, secret societies claiming descent from the order, conspiracy theories about hidden treasures and arcane knowledge. The actual history is buried under layers of myth and fantasy. The uncomfortable truths are edited out. The women are erased again, this time not by violence but by forgetting. But the Muslim sources remember. The descendants of the women who survived remember. It is passed down in families, in stories, in the collective memory of communities that were devastated by the Crusades. They remember that the Templars were not heroes, that the cross on their mantles did not make them holy, that religious conviction can be the justification for the worst human impulses. And this is the pattern that repeats throughout history. Every holy war, every righteous conquest, every time men convince themselves that their cause is so just that the rules do not apply, that the enemy is so evil that any method is permissible, that God is on their side so whatever they do is sanctified. The specifics change, the justifications evolve, but the pattern remains. The powerful prey on the vulnerable. Women bear the weight, and history tries to forget. If you have stayed with us through this difficult history, thank you. These are not stories we tell often, not stories we are comfortable with. They force us to confront the darkness that lives in the intersection of power and certainty, of faith weaponized, of righteousness turned toxic. The Templars were men, just men. They did what men throughout history have done when given power over the powerless, when told their cause is righteous, when assured that their victims are less than human. They took what they wanted and called it holy. They committed atrocities and called it crusade. They destroyed lives and called it service to God. The women they destroyed cannot speak for themselves. Their names are lost. Their stories are fragments. But their silence is its own testimony, testifies to what conquest means, to what holy war costs, to who pays the price when warriors march under crosses and claim divine mandate. We cannot undo what was done, cannot restore what was taken, cannot give voice to the silenced. But we can remember, we can refuse to romanticize. We can look at the castles and see not just impressive architecture but prisons. We can read the chronicles and hear what is not said. We can acknowledge that the Crusades were not noble adventures but catastrophes of religious violence that devastated communities and destroyed countless lives. The Knights Templar are gone. Their order is dead. Their castles are ruins. But their legacy remains, in the communities that still bear the scars, in the patterns that still repeat, in the ease with which we still convince ourselves that our causes are righteous and our enemies are evil and whatever we do is justified. Remember the women. Remember that they existed, that they suffered, that they died or survived in ways worse than death. Remember that they were human, that they had names and families and futures that were taken from them, that they deserved better than to be footnotes in the story of men who called themselves holy while doing unholy things. The cross and the crescent clashed in the Holy Land for 200 years. Hundreds of thousands died. Cities were destroyed. Cultures were devastated. And in the middle of it all, women paid the highest price. Not honored in death, not remembered in life, simply used and discarded and forgotten. This is the story history tries not to tell. The story of what happens when warriors wear crosses and claim God sanctions everything they do. The story of women caught between armies and ideologies and men who see them as prizes to be taken. The story that repeats every time we let righteousness become permission. The Templars are remembered as knights, as heroes, as defenders of faith. But the women remember them differently. And we should remember what the women knew, that crosses do not make men holy, that faith does not excuse cruelty, that conquest always has a cost that is paid by those who have no choice but to pay it. Remember, because forgetting is how we let it happen again, because romanticizing is how we erase the victims, because the women of Jerusalem and Acre and every Crusader conquest deserve to be more than footnotes. They deserve to be remembered. They demand to be remembered, and in remembering, we honor them, not with monuments or memorials, but with truth, with acknowledgement, with the refusal to let their suffering disappear into the sanitized legends of holy warriors and righteous crusades. The Templars did what they did. The women suffered what they suffered. History happened, cannot be undone, but it can be told, honestly, completely, including the parts we would rather forget. This is that telling. This is that remembering. This is the refusal to let crosses and righteousness and noble legends hide what actually happened in the dust and blood and screaming of conquest. The women are gone, but their story remains. Fragmentary, painful, necessary, a testament to what humans do, a warning about what we are capable of, a demand that we see clearly what lies behind the legends. Remember them, the forgotten women of the Crusades, the ones the Templars took and used and destroyed. They cannot speak, but we can speak for them. We can refuse to let them vanish. We can tell their story even when it is uncomfortable, especially when it is uncomfortable, because that is what we owe them. The only thing we can still give them: memory, acknowledgement, truth. The castles still stand. The crosses still mark the graves of knights. The legends still glorify the Crusades. But now you know what the legends leave out, what the crosses covered, what happened in those castles to women whose names we will never know but whose suffering we must acknowledge. This is history, not as we wish it were, but as it was: dark, brutal, honest. The story of what the Knights Templar did to Muslim women during the Crusades. The story we need to remember even when we wish we could forget. Remember,